Hello class, this is Scott Caruso from MUX1303 here with my week 1 discussion video to discuss the heuristics of my proposed app as it's compared to two competing apps out there on the market. Real quick overview of what I'm trying to do. It's called MyGov is the code name I've given it. And it's essentially an application at its core that will allow a user to geolocate or zip code search to find the elected officials for a given location, and I'll build upon that with additional functionality as time goes on. For instance, maybe the ability to write letters to the representatives and Congress people, things like that. I found two applications that do what I intend to do, or something similar to what I intend to do anyway. Both of them are iPhone applications that I'll show you here in a moment. One's called My Politician. Does a lot of the same things I want to do, though quite frankly I don't think it does them quite as well, and I think there are certainly there's room for growth that I'll talk about here in a moment. And the second application that's kind of a train wreck, but it's the next closest analog that I could find, called House of Representatives, which I'll walk through with the second half of this video. So real quick, let me pull up My Politician and I'll give you a brief run through of the app. Very basic. Start there. You see you can enter a zip code to do a city and state search. There's also a geolocate feature right here. So if you tap it, it geolocates to your current location and then gives you information about the elected officials. You'll notice here, this will be important later, what the results you get here says the president, senators, and representatives. You actually need to tap that to move into the view of the actual senators and representatives for your location. You can select one contacted, do Facebook, Twitter, and whatnot to contact via social media. There's error messaging built in if you try to enter plain text, things like that. So that's the basic gist of the application. Feel free to go check it out if you want more information about it. So first and foremost, this application in some cases absolutely does a really good job of informing the user of what's going on and giving him feedback. A good example is when you're doing the city-state search on that main page there. The user is warned that if he's entered a zip code, it will get erased when he selects a city and state because it's going to populate a new city and state for that a new zip code for that city and state. In other areas, though, not so much. For instance, when you're actually doing that city-state search, there's a done button, an OK button, that blinks red when it's time to tap and move on. To me, red means bad. I would much prefer to blink green, so I think that's really not informing the user at all in terms of appropriate feedback for what's going on at the moment. It's trying, I just think it's failing. In terms of accessing real-world data, like I said, it geolocates. It does exactly what it needs to do. It figures out where you are and tells you who your Congress people are for that location. And so in that way, it senses the real world on the user and adapts the application accordingly to that. The user has some level of control over what he's doing. He can go back and forward and whatnot. But a big problem is that the back button that's provided resembles a browser's reload button, not a back button. I think that's confusing to users and an area that could easily be improved upon in the future. In other applications, such as my own. There is an error prevention built in, both in terms of when you enter a zip code and when you enter text for the Facebook and Twitter messages, and so in that regard, the user is prevented from error-prone conditions that could destroy the application for him. There are some minor consistency issues within the application. The biggest one that I can note, and I'll actually pull it back up real quick to show you, is you see the enter zip code field on the main page, like I showed you before. If you tap the state-city search, it changes to select state and city, but the look of the button, the feel of the button, doesn't change whatsoever. So it looks like you can still tap it and enter something when you absolutely cannot. I think that's very inconsistent and is not providing the user really good situations and not telling them what things actually do mean. In my opinion, it looks like it means something. It means the same thing, but it's actually meaning something different in that regard. The application design is fairly straightforward, but it is unclear that the user can move from the main navigation view, like I showed you, to the more details by tapping on the button. Some kind of notification, some kind of information that he can advance there would be huge and very, very helpful. The user is able to save locations as a home and a favorite, which, based on the application design, is kind of a big deal. One improvement that I would suggest, however, in terms of making the app more flexible and more efficient, would be immediately after making a search, rather than forcing the user to tap that nondescript label, just move them into the next screen with the details. The chances are that if he searched for a zip code or a city-state, that's what the city and state that he wants. I think many more users are going to want to move on to the next screen rather than go back. and I think that's an area that they can improve upon in that regard. Error messaging is inconsistent. The zip code error is kind of bland. It doesn't actually tell you what the error is in the zip code. On the other hand, the error messaging for the Facebook stuff is actually pretty good. It tells you that you need to enter some data into the text. It tells you you can't enter a blank message. The last of the 10 base heuristics, only advanced users, I think, in terms of needing help in documentation, I think only advanced users are going to know that the little pin icon there is for geolocation. Everyone else will discover that through trial and error. I don't think that's necessarily a great thing. Some kind of help or a more descript icon there, I think, would give a hand with that. One last heuristic that I added was based on an article that I read by Kimberly Pendell and Michael Bowman. They did a usability study of the Portland State University mobile website, and one thing that they focused on a lot in their study was the need to be able to develop across platforms, because there's so many different platforms, so many different devices out there. So I wanted to look at the cross-platform ability, so to speak, of the applications. So I want my application to also be able to be something I could port to other devices if I wanted to, Android as an example. In this regard, the My Politician, though it uses some stock iOS options and looking buttons, it's got a distinct look, a distinct brand to it that clearly shows you that it could transfer between the two platforms. So next we're going to look at the House of Representatives app. There's not much to see, so this is going to go really quick. You've got this main view here with a nice flag and a couple different options for what you can search by. You click on one, say by religion. You pick another. There's a list of religions you get. You pick, and then you can pick a politician that matches that religion. And you're now on Jim Clyburn's page. As you can see there are actually empty table view cells that do nothing, along with some very, very basic information about the politician. That right there is the application as it stands. It is a competitor insofar as it provides the same kind of data that I plan on providing, but I know that I can do a much better job than that. It is out of date, it is ugly, and it can certainly be improved upon. It's a straightforward app using the UI navigation bar approach, so there's virtually nowhere the user needs to be informed of what is going on. Forward and back. It's very, very self-explanatory, very simple. It makes no attempts to connect the user to his real world. Mistakes can simply be corrected by pressing the back button at the top in a simple navigation view. However, you get to a point where there are blank table view cells that look like you should be able to advance when you cannot. All data in the application is static, as I mentioned, so at no point is user providing data, and thus there's no error prevention going on at any point at any time. The application uses all stock Apple interface components, so it does have some level of visual consistency, even though there are definitely problems in the layout, the sizing of the buttons, and things like that. At least there's that small level of consistency that it looks like something that was built for an iOS device. There's no hidden components, so the user doesn't need to recall how things work. It just works the way the user would expect it to work. There's no ability to customize and no flexibility at all. Like I said, just static data based on a table view design pattern. It's a simple, minimalist design, but aesthetically it's an absolute train wreck with poorly laid out data, empty tables. It's a mess, and definitely improvements that could be made there. There's nowhere to help users recognize or diagnose or recover from errors because there's no way to have an error, so the application doesn't handle errors or providing users with that kind of information anywhere, and there's also no help documentation provided anywhere within the application either. Finally, cross-compatibility. You can probably tell from what I've already said, it is strictly designed for the iOS with iOS components. There is no feasible way to take what already exists and put this on the Android without significant work on the back end. So it was clearly not designed for that level of future use. So those are the two biggest competitors that I was able to find to the app that I want to do. I was happy to see that there weren't many other apps that do what I want to do, and I'm encouraged by the fact that I think I can do better than these two apps are doing. I know I can do better than the House of Representatives app, and I have a high level of confidence that given time I can do better than the My Politician app as well. I guess we'll find out over the course of the next couple of weeks, won't we? This has been week 1, and I will talk to you later.